introduce today's speaker, the speaker of this session. Dr. Priyanka Tripathi is Associate Professor of English in the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences at the Indian Institute of Technology, Patna, India. Dr. Tripathi has actively researched and published in the varied areas of literary, cultural, and gender studies. She has nearly 100 papers to her credit, published in reputed national and international journals by the publishers like Sahitya Akademi, Taylor and Francis, Springer, Sage, Purdue University, Penn State University, Bridgewater State University, T. Greuter, University of Lords, so on and so forth. Alongside, she has also been published in various conference proceedings and edited volumes. She has delivered invited lectures and plenary talks in numerous academic events around the country, besides presenting her research outputs in international conferences at the University of Cambridge, Nottingham Trent University, University of Wisconsin-Madison, University of Cambridge, Buffalo, University of Helsinki, Murdoch University, Wayne State University, University of Florida, Harvard University, and so on. She has successfully organized more than 10 conferences and workshops in collaboration with various national and international institutions. Dr. Tripathi has spearheaded significant research projects such as those funded by AICTE, completed in 2019, and the Indian Council of Social Science Research ongoing, and has been actively guiding PhD students and teaching undergraduate students at IIT Patna. Thank you, ma'am. Over to you for this session.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dwivedi. That was very, very kind and like very comprehensive as well. An academician's journey is always difficult, and I am glad you value it in such wonderful words. So I also congratulate you on organizing such a wonderful program on capacity building through academic and research writing under the Atal program of government. And goes without saying that any kind of contribution that we make towards government bodies, being a government employee, I think it's not just a kind of return that we are delivering, the kind of positions we have got, but also I think largely we are contributing to the society and to the nation. So I congratulate you on that. And of course, also giving me opportunity to be part of this particular FDP, primarily for two reasons. One, of course, that I got an opportunity to do something that I like. And secondly, as I was discussing with you, it's a very diverse participation. So it's not every day that we get a participation like this, even when we organize FDPs. Generally, our participation is very homogeneous. And therefore, this kind of an audience where we are, we are going to interact with different people from different background is kind of overwhelming, because inclusion and diversity is two things that even Indian principle or Indian ethos boasts of. So I think for these two reasons, I was very happy to be part of this FDP, and also felt quite fortunate for that. Secondly, when I was asked about what should I speak, because it's a very, what should I say, in the absence of a right word, it's a very broad field. I mean, and despite all attempts we make, there is still a lot of lacunae that will be there. So it was very difficult for me to pin down on what I should be going ahead. So I did a lot of brainstorming, in the sense that I first thought maybe I can take up article writing, and then I went on research paper writing, and then maybe I thought even to the basics, I thought maybe I said. So, while juggling between a lot of topics, I thought maybe I should choose something which was intermediate, and therefore I chose how to write a paragraph, because it was not as basic as sentence, and it was not as intense as article writing, a kind of a midway, a kind of a bridge between the two. On that note, I'll share my slides, and I hope then I'll take it up from there.
Thank you.
So can you see my slides?
Yeah, it's visible.
Okay, so I am going to talk about how do we develop an academic paragraph. Now, in the entire body of writing, paragraph writing is something that, like I said, comes in between. And therefore, it requires a kind of a synergy and a syntax of language that you can sometimes compromise with when you are making sentences either or writing a bigger article. Paragraph is generally very non-compromising and unforgiving. So therefore, the paragraph writing becomes very intense kind of a job when we are doing. Now, goes without also saying that there is a lot of difference between how we speak and how we write. And why I'm telling you this, or maybe mentioning it at this point of time, is for the fact that when we take up writing, inadvertently we get into this zone of speaking our mind, writing our mind. So while we speak our mind and our mind functions in a very faster way, and there are a lot of thoughts that can come to your mind and you can kind of expose it through language, the same is not possible when you're writing. And therefore, writing becomes a very conscious kind of exercise, despite it can involve a lot of uh, uh, brainstorming, a lot of thought process that has gone into your making of that particular thought. So let me come to the first part of what I call organizing paragraph. Now, when it comes to organizing paragraph, much before all this paraphernalia of paragraph writing, let me also make one thing very, make a point right now, is that whenever you have to write something, do give a lot of thought. Like, you can't just sit on a table and write. That happens with a lot of people. When they sit, they start writing, but that is with people who have practiced themselves into writing for quite a long time. If you are now, whatever I speak has to be customized depending on your own assessment of whether you fall into the category of advanced learner, or you fall into the category of intermediate learner, or you are just a beginner. Now, also, I would like to make it a point that while it may not be very imperative for you right now, but when you take classes or you go to your own field and you talk about these tenets, maybe then it might come handy to make these points. Because while we go to a class, sometimes when we go even to an undergraduate class or postgraduate, we find a very heterogeneous group, and sometimes we come across students who would say that what you're talking about is probably not as important as it is, and therefore we kind of make them realize that it's for everybody. And while you, I understand, have reached a point where you do not require these information, maybe somebody who is a colleague of yours, a classmate of yours, might require. So it goes without saying that, of course, you have to customize whatever I speak today in terms of how you want to represent your language in a paragraph. Now, when you sit down to write, there should be a lot of thoughts already in your mind. Now, why I say this, because basically what we do when we are writing is that we are kind of filtering. So writing is a kind of process of filtering your thoughts, nothing more than that. It's a kind of a juxtaposition of ideas and filtering your thoughts. So, like when you plant a small tree, and then it starts growing, and it starts growing any which way. Speaking is just like that. You plant an idea, it'll just go on and on. And but writing is like pruning that particular tree, that shrub that you have. So what is a paragraph? So now paragraph is a group of sentences or a single sentence that forms a unit. Then, of course, paragraph is a series of sentences that are organized and coherent and are related to a single topic. Almost every piece of writing you do that is longer than a few sentences should be organized into paragraphs. A paragraph is a group of related sentences that support one idea, which you can call as controlling idea. In general, paragraph consists of three parts: the topic sentence, the relevant details, and the closing or bridge sentences. Now, I'll discuss a little more about what is written here. Now, when we talk about paragraph being a series of sentences that are organized and coherent, why do you use these two words, very loaded words, in any kind of communication? Organize and coherent. So imagine when you, today is a Sunday morning, and many of you would, in general, do a lot of household chores on Sunday. So what do you do? This particular day, your house is like very neat and clean. Why? Because it is organized. Rest of the days, while you are working, you're rushing for the office, you're barely having your breakfast, you're packing your tiffins, and you're coming back home at night, you are all tired. You are in no mood to see where your posters are placed. If they are on the center table or they are not, it doesn't make much of a difference to you in your working days. But when you are on at home on Sunday, you like to see everything spick and span. So same is with paragraph. It has to be very neat, very coherent, very organized, because that is what gives not only neatness to language or your idea, but it also gives your idea a kind of a logical bent. If everything is very neatly juxtaposed, if your idea is put one after other, like it says, three parts: the topic sentence, which is the controlling idea, the main idea of what you are going to say. Now, all the other sentences are going to just help. Like, you know, a good operation is going on, and the main surgeon is the topic sentence. All others are kind of nurses and helping staff and others. And then the conclusion is, of course, what has happened. So, you know, all it's a team that helps you build your language. So paragraph is like your team member. So there are three basic parts, and you can further kind of classify it into various other parts. Like even for details, how do you go about talking about those details? What are the kind of relevant details and irrelevant details you can put? Because sometimes when you are writing also, you can probably bring in those ideas which may not be so relevant, but you still feel like putting it. So when you write a paragraph, of course, there is one controlling idea, one basic thought on which you have built your entire paragraph. And therefore, everything else is just a kind of a supplement or a complementing thought to what your controlling idea is. Now, when you, so this is the basic format of organizing a paragraph. Now, let's come to what can be the features of a paragraph when you write a paragraph. Now, I'll also talk about something, maybe, you know, when you go, some of you must be academicians, and maybe, you know, working in a senior position or something like that. Maybe, you know, this you might have also come across, because I do come across sometimes. So when you ask somebody to write a paragraph, they come up with 3 paragraphs. It's not a test of the writing skill. It is in a way, but not in that format. So the first thing probably, in sometimes, you know, there is a compulsory course that I teach, which is about English for communication skills. So that is a PhD level course. And it's a compulsory course for all, and irrespective of all the departments, all the students take up. So when I go to that class, it's very difficult to kind of bring in everybody on the same page, because there are students from mechanical, and there are students from humanities, and there are students from physics and mathematics and all whatnot. So all kinds of students go through that course. Now, in that course, it's also difficult to come to the same page, because each one of them, and they're very senior students. I mean, you know, sometimes they are, of course, 26, 28, but sometimes also we have sponsored category and part-time category, and some people have already gone for job, and then they have taken a break because PhD was their ultimate, thing that they wanted to do. So they kind of come back. So it's a very, very heterogeneous group, very, very diverse. So bringing everybody on the same thought level is sometimes challenging, and therefore when you tell them, because they have been out of either practice or language is something, when you are in technical field, probably you think that language is not so important. But at the end of the day, language is the string on through which you kind of rope in all your other pearls of wisdom or pearls of knowledge that you have. So when we ask them to write a paragraph, they apparently come up with 2-3 paragraphs. So that is the basic mistake sometimes we our students do, or sometimes when I talk also to some people, they might end up doing. So that is the first mistake that we don't have to do. So in one paragraph, there is just one idea. Like I said, when you talk about the controlling idea, that there is only one control. If the control is into different divided into different groups or different parts, then probably your purpose of writing that paragraph will go missing. Therefore, one paragraph, one idea, and all other ideas that you write is going to support that particular idea, is how we function, how the paragraph functions. Now, like I said, the following sentences develop and support the idea clearly. Like everybody else is kind of supporting. One idea is controlling. I'll give examples later. Now, the transition words and other transition devices aid in identifying the information and leading the reader through the information present. Now, why I call these transition and transition devices or words? Because we have to go from one idea to another. So when you choose to conclude, you inadvertently use words like thus, in my opinion, finally. So all these are what? They kind of get you on the ground of transition. Now they make you reach a conclusion, or maybe if you say therefore or something like that, so it brings you to a different level of what you want to say. So and then of course we have concluding sentences, which sums up the point made and can often lead to the next paragraph in a paper. So when you are doing this academic writing, I'll give you one example where these researches on management is concerned. So what happens in the researches that happen in or for that matter, even in other experiment-based field. So you have a kind of a hypothesis, and on the kind of objectives that you have set based on the literature review that you have done, and then you kind of do your experiment. Now, once you've done this experiment, you come on to discuss your results and discussion based on what you experiment, and then you finally conclude. But can you go the other way around? No. Why? Because your entire exercise of writing is contingent upon that experiment. So the experiment has to come somewhere in between. Now, also the point is, no matter how good the experiment has been conducted, you can't emphasize on the importance of your experiment unless you have expressed it in a language that does justice to your experiment, that does justice to your fieldwork, or that does justice to your research. So uh, all this has to be concluded very well, and each sentence cannot be as important as your controlling idea. Like the topic sentence generally is placed in the beginning. Okay, so but there is no hard and fast rule for that. It's very flexible. But mostly and generally, we hold the controlling idea, which is the topic sentence of a paragraph, at the beginning. And if everything is important, probably, like in a household also, what happens? Generally, the load is kind of shared. There are particular things that your partner does, and there are few things that you do, and either ways. So not everything is decided by one person. Something like that. So sometimes groups of paragraphs work together in tandem to break up one large section of information. And in such cases, transition and coherence is particularly important. When you think, oh, I'm so sorry. When you think that probably the idea that you are going to infuse into this particular paragraph is important, you have to break it. That is how you strike a balance in between one paragraph to the other, which might lead to a different idea. That is how you built your narrative. So what is an article? Well, what is a research paper, or what is a longer narrative? A longer narrative is putting together a lot of paragraphs which has ideas related to one topic. Like, for example, if we take up, there was a lot of debate about whether COVID injections they are giving, the Covaxin and Covishield is good or not. There was a lot of debate about whether they should be given or not. And therefore, in the initial drive, you might have seen that there was a lot of resistance in people not taking the vaccine. So, if you read research papers at that point of time, or you read news articles at that point of time, primarily they were intended towards making relevant points, whether it is good or bad. Sometimes they were in pro, then you read like that, all the narratives, all the paragraphs kind of corroborated to that idea. And if they were talking about not being so good, they corroborated with those ideas. It wasn't like it is good and bad at the same time, something like that. Now, how do we do that? How do we organize a paragraph? What are the methods then that we do? So the first thing is chronicling. So one after the other, you narrate the incident in such a way where one idea is placed, and then everything else is just a kind of a narrative that is going to support that particular idea and finally conclude it. It is all done in a very timely kind of a manner. So it's chronicling. Then, of course, is exposition, which is structuring the matter spatially, which is very specific details about what something looks, smells, tastes, sounds, or feels like. Now, the third method is the process. The process is when did the event occur? How did it move from first to second to third? First, second, not just first, second, third, but primarily, secondly, and thirdly, or, introduction, discussion, and conclusion, something like that. So, and then, of course, categorization. So you divide this into categories or explain different parts of a topic. And then illustration, wherein you give instances and explain how those intentions or instances support your contention. So what you have presented in the topic sentence, how are other sentences going to support what the point that you want to make is something that is presented there. Now let us come to an example that I talk about here. Say, for example, it's a small narrative which has a chronological bent to it. So, one North Carolina man found quite a surprise last year while fishing in the Catawba River, a piranha. Jerry Melton of Gastonia reeled in a 1 pound, 4-ounce fish with an unusual bite. Melton could not identify it, but a nearby fisherman did. Melton at first could not believe he had caught a piranha. He said, "That ain't no piranha. They ain't got piranha around here." Melton was right. The fish is native to South America, and North Carolina prohibits owning the fish as a pet or introducing the species to local waterways. The sharp-toothed carnivorous fish likely found itself in the Catawba River, when its illegal owner released the fish after growing tired of it. Wildlife officials hope that the piranha was the only of its kind in the river, but locals are thinking twice before they wade in the water. Now, if you read this narrative, I'll break it down here. So if you read this particular narrative, you see that it's placed in the first style or the first method of paragraph writing, which is putting things into a chronological order. So what happened? The first thing that happened is that there is a fish that is found in the river, which is the central idea, which is the topic sentence. Now, who found it? It was Melton who found it. And then the process of identifying that fish began. And then they finally identify that it's from South America. And then they come to know that it's kind of banned here. And then, of course, they make an assumption that probably there must be some illegal owner, because how did it come? So who just got tired of it and then it came here? And now the repercussion of it. The repercussion is that probably the locals who go for swimming or in that particular water, or maybe fishing or something, are kind of scared because it's a carnivorous fish. So it's one after the other. It's a chronicling method of putting a paragraph. So like I said, there are various methods in which you can write a paragraph. This is one of the easiest ones. You put one idea after the other and go on supporting it with sentences and events like that. The second is of the exposition method, in which, like I said, even initially, you talk about specific details in terms of how things look, smell, taste, sound, or feel like. Like, say, for example, here we take up again piranhas. They are omnivorous, freshwater fish, which are mostly known for their single row of sharp triangular teeth in both jaws. Piranha's teeth come together in a scissor-like bite and are used for puncture and tearing. Baby piranha are small and about the size of a thumbnail, but full-grown piranha grow up to 6 to 10 inches, and some individual fish up to 2 feet long have been found. The many species of piranha vary in color, though most are either silvery or orange underbelly and throat, or almost entirely black. Now, like I said, the method of exposition is the paragraph writing method, in which you describe the smell, taste, sound, or feeling of something. So in this particular paragraph, we tend to talk about piranhas, like the piranhas are found, and then you take up what are piranhas. So you talk about them being omnivorous, they're, because we are talking about, they being harmful, not harmful, but they might just be not so good for human beings. They can bite, they can injure life. So what is it that they injure life with? They have these teeth which is scissor like, so they can bite you. So we talk about that. And then you talk about how do you identify whether it's a piranha. So not just that, they are small, but full grown can be like 2 feet. And the color, of course, is silvery and orange. So that is how you kind of detail upon this method of paragraph writing, which is called the exposition. Now, the third is the method of paragraph writing, in which we discuss process, like experiments and all. So this you can talk about how the event moved ahead in the sequence. Like the first. I think someone has kept the mic on. So the first, the second, and the third, primarily, secondly, and thirdly, firstly, secondly, finally. All these words you can put together. Now, I'll read out again how, and you just identify how one paragraph is different from another. You can safely swim with piranhas, but it's important to know how and when to do it. First, choose an appropriate time, preferably at night and during the rainy season. Avoid piranhas infested waters during the dry season when food supplies are low and piranhas are mostly desperate. Piranhas feed during the day, so nighttime swimming is much safer. Second, streamline your movement. Wild or erratic activity attracts the attention of piranhas. Swim slowly and smoothly. Finally, never enter the water with an open wound or raw meat. Piranhas attack larger animals only when they are wounded. The presence of blood in the water may tempt the fish to attack. If you follow these simple precautions, you will have little to fear about. Now, again, you see, this is about the process. It's going to describe the process of how you are going to sort of manage your process of swimming in the water, same as piranha is. So there are a few negotiations that you have to do in terms of how you will manage this situation. So it talks about the timing, it talks about the ways, it talks about the precautions, and it talks about the timings. So all those things are put together. So the first thing is most important, and it says you have to choose, very importantly, the time, because according to this particular paragraph, it said that they are absolutely crazy. It's, maybe in the daytime because they are hunting for food, they're wanting some kind of activity. So nighttime swimming is safe with them, is what the paragraph writer tries to say. And then not to make erratic movements, because erratic movements might just attract them and they might just feel that they are getting attacked. So they might attack in reverse. And then, of course, the smell of the blood. So that can kind of entice them into attacking you. So kind of you be cautious of that. So that is what they try to say. Now, this is categorization. Now you categorize. So piranhas comprise more than 30 to 60 species of fish, depending on whom you ask. The many species fall into four genera: Pygocentrus, Pygopristis, Serralsalmus, and Pristobrycon. Piranha in the Pygocentrus genus are the most common variety, the kind you might find in a pet store. Pygopristis piranha are herbivores, feasting on seeds and fruits, not flesh. In contrast, fish in the Serralsalmus genus eat only meat, and their teeth are razor sharp. Pristobrycon are the least friendly of all piranhas. They often bite the fins of other fish, even fish of the same species. The label piranha then refers to the wide variety of species. Now, they have come to know about this piranha, which is in their sea, in their river, and now they go on to discuss how many types of piranhas can be there, what is the kind of classification that we can do, is there a categorization possible? If there is a categorization, what are the characteristics that we can adhere to? So similarly, you also have to see in your narrative when you are making classifications, because that is something that we do on a day-to-day basis. You uh, kind of classify. This is, in fact, more than anything else in methods of paragraph. There are two methods of paragraph that might just come very, very handy to all of us, which is about categorization and chronicling. Mostly, we juggle between these two methods of writing in academic sphere. When we take up academic writing, generally these are two methods that we adhere to. But of course, exposition is also there when we are describing something, especially in fields of science and medical and all. But mostly in terms of engineering and humanities, probably uh, categorization and chronicling are two methods of paragraph writing that come very handy. Now, illustration goes with illustration is something that goes on everywhere. You have to, if you have taken an experiment, or you have conducted a field work, or you have done a very intense interview, an in-depth interview, which is often called in research, or you have done some kind of survey, or you have done some kind of analysis, theoretical or practical, whatever. In either of the circumstances that we talk about in research, or in teaching, or in your practice, whatever, uh, illustration is something that you do on a day-to-day basis. Now, if you are a doctor, and the patient asks you, what has happened to me? And you do a diagnosis. Okay, you have this, anything for that matter. The patient is not satisfied because the patient hasn't understood. And that happens, like, sometimes when we meet our mechanical engineering colleagues, they talk as if entire world knows theories of thermodynamics. And then we have to make it a point, see, we don't understand thermodynamics. You have to explain us. And they talk about contractions and expansion in such a way. For us, contraction and expansion are two words we understand the meaning of. It's very much there in our vocabulary. But how does contraction and expansion intersect with mechanical engineering is something that we have to be understood, or we are made to understand in a layman's language, in a language that can be understood by all. Otherwise, in the absence of how this expansion and contraction works within the interventions of mechanical engineering, we will not know. Like, when they talk about some kind of malignancy in medical, we understand whether what is malignancy, but what can it mean is something that only a medical professional can say. So something like that. So each field from where we come from have specific terms that needs to be illustrated. And in the absence of that illustration, probably it is not understood by the the audience that you are interested to make them know. And at this point of time, I'll talk about something that is very important in the context of communication in general, and the entire idea of why we write. Now, when we talk about any form of formal communication, of which academic paragraph writing is an integral part, because writing in itself is very, 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 very integral to any sort of communication. Because if everything was managed by speaking, writing would not have come into practice. Writing came into practice because authentication became important. Owning became important. You had to own what you spoke. Spoken words had not much value in terms of operating in a professional field. And there is where writing came into being. Our memories are very short-lived. So what I say today maybe if you ask me to repeat, just maybe 3 days later, I may not say the same thing. In the absence of which, how do you validate what I spoke today? It's in terms of writing, like here, in terms of recording. So that is how writing came into being. Now, when writing came into being, it was validated for particular kind of audience. It was meant for some people. It wasn't meant just like that. It was meant for a. So therefore, whenever we are writing, we have to know who our audience is, who our reader is. And therefore, like you see, when you buy these policies, subject to market risk, some information conditions apply, all those things they write. And if you read the entire document, you may not sometimes understand a few things. And I remember I was younger and I was made to read one of the documents. My uncle was buying a policy and apparently he was investing a lot of money into that. And then he called me and he said, Tum English padti ho, idhar aao. And so I went and he said, you read the entire document and explain it to me. And while I understood a few things, certain things were just beyond my head. And then he kind of told me, he looked at me and he said, you teach English and you don't understand this. I said, I do, but these are some of the points that are basically not for English people. They're meant for people in law because they talk about legal things. And I don't know what repercussions are they talking about. And therefore, I may not comment on any of those things. So I was absolutely okay to be understood dumb by him, but I was not ready to make wrong sentences, wrong interpretations of the sentences that were written there because they were very specific. If everybody can read those subject to market risk things, probably we don't need interventions. And that is why when these people come to sell their policy, we ask them, okay, what does this mean? What does this mean? When you talk about a particular line, how is it going to be interpreted and stuff like that? So illustration, like I said, is important. And when you illustrate, the most important part of that illustration is knowing who your reader is going to be. You can't compromise with that because illustration is only done for being understood by the reader, that is, who is going to read your document. So say, for example, this is about a paragraph about a song which says, slave spirituals often had hidden double meanings. On one level, spirituals referenced heaven, Jesus, and the soul. But on another level, the song spoke about slave resistance. For example, according to Frederick Douglass, the song, O Cannon, Sweet Cannon, spoke of slaves longing for heaven, but it also expressed their desire to escape to the north. I'm sorry, I'll have to see this because otherwise somebody might just go on ringing.
Ma'am, you need to unmute.
Yeah. I'm so sorry. Actually, I just said that I stay alone. So if I don't open the door, the knock will continue.
No problem at all.
So I'll come back to this. So when you talk about this particular song, O Cannon, Sweet Cannon, spoke of slaves longing for heaven, but it is also expressed their desire to escape to the north. Careful listeners heard this second meaning in the following lyrics. I don't expect to stay much longer here, Run to Jesus, shun the danger. I don't expect to stay. When slaves sang this song, they could have been speaking of their departure from this life and their arrival in heaven. However, they also could have been describing their plans to leave the South and run not to Jesus, but to the North. Slaves even used songs like Steal Away to Jesus at midnight to announce to other slaves the time and place of secret forbidden meanings. What whites heard are as merely spiritual songs. Slaves discerned as detailed messages. The hidden meanings in spirituals allowed slaves to sing what they could not say. And I will tell you something which is very, very personal, but at the same time, how context is something that is important to the content being represented. Uh, and that can vary if you don't have the idea. Like, it's a double meaning here. So I'm sure 75 people in this meeting, and all of you must have heard of the song called Mujhse Pehli Si Mohabbat Mere Mehboob Na Maan. It's a poem by Faiz, very, very popular. So while I was growing up, I had heard this song quite a few times, and it is one of still my favorites. But when you are a teenager and when you are young, these kind of songs transpose you to a different world altogether. So I was also one of the hardcore fans of this particular song, and I would listen to it on a loop many times, only thinking that probably it was a very, very romantic song. It was only when I went for my postgrad at some point of time, there was this discussion on Faiz, and somebody spoke about this poem. I understood, and then of course I came to know that it was about the whole nationalistic thing. And from that point of time, the entire meaning of the song changed for me. The song was the same, but the way nationalism, when got fused into this particular song, changed the meaning for me, is how even when we write certain paragraphs can be different in the absence of a context. So when you talk about your own research or your own analysis that you take up, if you don't give context to the reader will be free to interpret. And then sometimes you can afford to go ahead with the risk of not being understood in the same context. But when it comes to academic writing, you can't afford to. Like in my case, if I talk about myself, it was okay. It was a creative writing. Whatever I'm talking about today is not about creative writing. Creative writing is very liberating. You can just put any grammar, you can do away with the syntax, unless and until your emotional or the core of what you want to say remains there. It's okay. But in formal writing or in academic writing, you can't do. Like, you can't ask in an academic writing, Aati kya khandala? It can only happen in a creative writing. If you are doing a very conscious academic writing, you have to have a proper sentence. Are you coming to Khandala with me? Is a Khandala trip planned? Who are our companions to Khandala? Something like that. It has to have a sequence. It has to have a kind of a narrative. And it just can't come from anywhere. So when you talk about these slave spirituals, the white understood it in a different way. And others understood it in a different way. The slaves understood it in a different way. For them, it was a kind of a rescue yearning to go to the Jesus. It was a kind of a hymn to lead to some place where their liberation lied. And it was nowhere but in the feet of Jesus. It was in the feet of faith that they believed in. It was in the absence of the slavery their liberty lied. So something of that sort is what I wanted to say in this. But particularly what I wanted to say was, if I can bring it in a very nutshell kind of a point, is that whenever you are doing any kind of academic writing, your content has to be placed in a context, in the absence of which the kind of meaning you want to render to the reader will go missing. Now, how do we do that? Now, let us come to the method all over again. Like we discussed that these are some of the types: the chronicling, the illustration, or exposition. All these methods are part of how your paragraph can be characterized. Now, how do we reach a point where we can give a structure to a paragraph? So the one particular, or the first thing that we have to be careful about is think of a controlling idea and frame the topic sentence. Now, what is the core, what is the purpose of writing that paragraph? Like, say, for example, here I take up slave spirituals often had hidden double meanings. Like, all Mirabai songs. For that matter, even Gitanjali by Rabindranath Tagore, if you read, it's full of ideas that can be contextualized in different forms, while they all remain to be spiritual yearnings. So even here, when you talk about slave spirituals, they often had very hidden double meaning sentences. So that is what is the controlling idea of the previous paragraph we read. So formulation of controlling idea is the first step of the paragraph development. Like when you do a diagnosis, you have this, your blood sugar is, you have diabetes. And then you go on to tell about what was your fasting blood sugar, and then this is your PP sugar, and the kind of precautions you can take. When we go to a class and we discuss about a particular research, say, for example, maybe something on, I teach communication. So say, for example, I have to talk about listening skills. So the very first sentence I begin with is, listening is the mother of all speaking. So unless you are a good listener, you cannot be a good speaker. So from there, I kind of begin, which makes very, very clear to the audience, to the class, or to the people I'm interacting with, that in order to be a good speaker, you have to be a very good listener, and how it kind of lays the foundation of listening being a very important exercise in the entire process of communication. Of course, no denying, reading is as much as important as speaking. And of course, writing, no doubt, entire existence of academic world is contingent upon how much we are writing. So, of course, all those things are important. But when I go to a listening class, I make sure that I because sometimes it so happens that listening is, because it's a kind of a little passive activity compared to reading and writing and speaking, it takes a back foot in the process of communication. But when you go to a listening skills class, because you have to emphasize upon why listening is very major activity in the process of communication, you have to basically set the ground. And therefore, when I say listening is the mother of all speaking, it kinds of, in a slightly baritone voice, it kind of sets the background for me. Then everything else that I say kind of falls into place with that core idea where listening is the most important activity. Because everybody at the end of the day, especially in the classes that I go, wants to speak well. So let me come back to what I was talking about. So usually it's expressed in through the topic sentence. The controlling idea is expressed in the topic sentence. Sometimes one sentence may not be sufficient to express a paragraph's controlling idea. So what you do is you immediately juxtapose your second idea into that. Like, listening is the mother of all speaking, I said. And then I immediately kind of, unless you have listened to a lot of things, how do you speak well? So something like that. Now, how do you elucidate the controlling idea? So the paragraph goes ahead with the expression of the rationale of the writer, who directs the reader's understanding and interpretation of the focal idea of the paragraph. Now, when you talk about this particular controlling idea, the topic sentence, now all other detailing that you take up depends on this particular topic sentence, like I said in my earlier slides as well. So one example that I can give from the same paragraph is, on one level, spirituals referenced heaven, which is Jesus, and the soul. But on another level, the song spoke about slave resistance. It is all the same. When they say it had double meaning, it had indeed double meaning, because while it was understood as just a kind of a spiritual hymn by the whites, it was on another level understood in different capacities. So one, of course, was that you refer to God, refer to Jesus, and the soul searching. But at another point of time, it also talked about the kind of resistance that should be there in slavery. So slave spirituals were also meant to be a kind of a liberating medium for the people who were part of it, who were, as slaves. Then, of course, you can give examples. So when you say listening is the mother of all speaking, you put a sentence like that, a topic sentence like that, you have to give examples. How? Why? How come? Something like that. So the explanation of the topic sentence should be succeeded by the supportive instances or evidences. The instances strengthen the relationship between the topic sentence and following explanation. Now, there are two explanations that I go ahead with. The first, for example, according to Frederick Douglass, the song, "O Cannon, Sweet Cannon," spoke of slaves longing for heaven, but it has also expressed their desire to escape to the north. Careful listeners heard the second meaning in the following lyric. I don't expect to stay much longer here. Run to Jesus, shun the danger. I don't expect to stay. Now, the person who is writing the paragraph gives the example of Frederick Douglass to elucidate upon the idea of slave spirituals not being unilateral in terms of meaning. It's multi-layered, and at least bilaterally layered, if not multi. Say, for example, when we, I'm giving you a lot of a reference to my class because I'm of course a teacher, and so my interactions happen on a day-to-day basis in a class, and therefore most of my examples come from the class. And so don't mind that, because I get my context from the classes that I teach. So often in a listening skill class, I consider listening skills very important. And that is why in all my classes, I emphasize a lot on being aware. Sometimes I also uh, suggest my students to uh, listen to their friends without their mobile phones. And I say that if you are constantly watching or looking at your mobile phone by listening to a friend of yours who has come to share something with you, probably you are not doing justice to the kind of faith that other person has had in you. So I'll come back to what I wanted to say about the class. So when I take up this listening class, there is this vocabulary based exercise that I do. So I play one song and I ask them to choose 10 words. And then I ask them to write a meaning, a synonym, and then a sentence out of those particular words. And I have like played trick quite a few times. And every time I play, especially in the first year, Country Roads Take Me Home, that particular song, if you have heard of, it's a very popular song. The students get transposed to a different world altogether. And at least 50% of the class, I can vouch, doesn't write those 10 sentences because they have not heard or listened anything beyond country roads take me home to the place I belong. For them, that line kind of curtails every other emotion that probably that song can generate in them. It freezes their mind. And therefore, when you write a paragraph, if you fit in too many ideas, then probably that is what is going to happen. Your mind can get perplexed, the reader can get perplexed in terms of too many ideas getting fused into one. So, Frederick Douglass example, let me come back to this. Uh, it gives, it kind of corroborates to the idea of spiritual slave, spiritual slave spirituals being a double meaning sentence, double meaning hymns. And they even used to sing songs like Steal Away to Jesus to announce to other slaves that the time and place of secret or forbidden meanings. So the entire narrative or in that paragraph is built around how slave spirituals, number one, have double meanings. Number two is how they are primarily uh, related to the leanings towards reaching the Jesus. So something like that. Now, another example of how you can describe the instance is about developing it to justify the suitability of the controlling idea and its explication. No instance should be left unexplained. So if you read the paragraph, you find that not just the instance of Douglass or the other lyric that is fused into that particular paragraph is not corroborating to the topic sentence. In fact, they choose the suitable, the examples, the lyrics, the instances that have been there are kind of very suitable to the controlling idea that is given in that sentence. So you may explain the relationship between the instance and the topic sentence in the same sentence that introduces the example. However, the usual practice is to explain the relationship separately. So when slaves sang this song, they could have been speaking. So this goes into the next paragraph. They could have been speaking of their departure from this life and their arrival in heaven. However, they also could have been describing their plans to leave the South and run, not to Jesus, but to God. So while there is one section of people who can understand or interpret that paragraph as, as a kind of a leaning towards Jesus, but it also can mean a liberation from slavery, is what the interpretation could be. So it depends on how you are reading a particular paragraph. But like I said, these are examples from narratives that may fall not strictly in the category of academic writing. In academic writing, we can't do this. We can't have ambiguous meanings. There has to be a very concrete context of the content that we are talking about. Now, very important, conclusion. So when conclusion takes place, generally you have to avoid, when you talk about conclusion, I'll come back to one more thing that I'm interested to talk about. But before that, let me talk about the last step of the paragraph development, which involves trying to kind of tighten up the loose ends of the paragraph and reminding the reader of the relevance of the information in the paragraph relating to the main idea. It is simpler to take your reader to the next paragraph, if not concluding it. So what White heard as merely spiritual songs, slaves discerned as detailed messages. The hidden meanings in spirituals allowed slaves to sing what they could not say. Very true. That happened with the nationalistic movements as well. If you read a lot of literature involved at the time of partition, before the partition, I mean, during, like, you know, when this whole freedom movement was going on, basically the idea, like, you know, why do you think the salt satyagraha started? It was as basic as salt, but it led to a very major campaign, because that was Gandhi's way of putting it. It could start with the basics, and it didn't even, you know, the colonizers didn't even recognize the importance of such a massive movement it might lead to. So sometimes, is what I'm trying to say, the meanings can be very different than what they are interpreted as later on. So a conclusion to your paragraph is extremely important, because that might lead to the other idea in terms of how you make a transmission to the next paragraph. So, and like I wanted to say about language. So when we speak, like if you see this entire recording, you might come across several words that I make a repetition of. I fall to small phrases on which I weave my language. Like, say, for example, sort of, like, maybe, you know, all these words, which is absolutely okay when you come to talk about speaking language or speaking skills or things being spoken. But when you are writing, and if you go on repeating these phrases that you have used in your speaking while writing, probably it will be very monotonous, number one, because you are reading the same thing all over again. Writing is also crisp. It needs less language. And therefore, like I just said, when you say crisp, I need not say less language. But in speaking, I can afford. In speaking, I want my listener to understand me. And therefore, I can go on making these details. I can go on making these variations in terms of how I use my language. But in writing, I can just write crisp and be done with that. Nothing more. So in terms of how we use the same vocabulary in our reading or listening or speaking is different from how we put it in writing. So I'll just give you one example that comes to my mind right now. So when we talk about concluding a paragraph, so generally while speaking, we might say in nutshell. But when we are writing, we need not say in nutshell. We say to conclude, or maybe finally, because the simpler the writing is, the better. If you choose to fuse your writing with very bombastic words, they may not be understood by the people you are intending to be understood, in the absence of which your entire exercise of putting your thoughts into a paragraph become futile. So we have to be very careful, especially people from technical side. They have to keep a lot of care about the kind of language they use, which the simpler the better. Now, each sentence, I'll come back to some more examples. Each sentence in a paragraph and each text must be coalesced. It comes from the word coalescence, which is jointing together. So every sentence of the paragraph should be connected to a single controlling idea that is often expressed in the topic sentence. Like I said, even in the beginning, that it has to have one idea, and that is what you have to go on expressing or detailing upon in the next few sentences. I take up one example. I live in a flat with my family. We have 2 bedrooms and a light living room. We have a garden and we have small flowers there. In weekdays, I arrive home at 5 o'clock and I have lunch. Then I do my homework and go to bed. I had a computer, but now it doesn't work. I have a brother and a sister, and I think I'm very lucky to live with them. Sometimes our relatives visit us. Our flat becomes very crowded sometimes, but I like it. Now, the analysis, let's go to the analysis. So the controlling idea here is basically the description of the house. I live in a flat with my family. So it's basically going to talk about the flat. But there are some sentences that do not talk about the flat. Like, in weekdays, I arrive home at 5 o'clock and I have lunch. This doesn't describe the flat. Then I do my homework and go to bed. Again, a very redundant sentence. I had a computer, but it doesn't work. Now, each of these sentences do not refer to the central idea of, or do not complement to the central idea of the sentence, the topic sentence. But a paragraph writing, like I said, has to have sentences that kind of complement the central idea of what is being spoken or written. In our case, we are writing academic paragraphs. So that is what is kept in mind. Now, the second thing is the cogent, the cognition part of it. How do you take I mean, how are things logical when they are arranged in a very systematic way? Now, when we take up example, I live in a house in Izmit. It isn't old or modern. It's a normal Turkish house. We can say it is near the sea. It takes about 10 minutes to go to the seaside on foot. We have 1 bedroom, 1 living room. We also have 2 other rooms too. We use them as a dining room. Naturally, we have a kitchen, a bathroom, and a toilet. I live with my parents, and our house has a little garden. My parents spend their time there to grow vegetables and fruit. Now, let's see the order of the ideas. Where the house is, the type of the house, the location, the types of room that are there, whom does he live with, And then, of course, the garden. The paragraph is well organized until he or she says that she lives with the parents. It looks like this idea interrupted his description of the house. You know, maybe if he said in the beginning, I live with my parents in a house in Izmit, that may not have been a very contradicting idea, or an idea that kind of intervenes the flow of the narrative. But coming late in the paragraph making, it intervenes, it hinders the flow of the language that we generally intend to have in a paragraph. Let's go ahead and talk about how not to start a paragraph. So each idea discussed in the paragraph should be well explained and thoroughly evidenced, supporting paragraph's controlling idea. Sometimes we start with a very nonsensical sentence, such as, I want to talk about, or this plays a great role in our lives. This is an important issue in today's world. How not to do that is if we bring the content and meaning of that sentence out and it doesn't change the meaning of the paragraph. That is when you realize. So, you know, I'll talk about one poet here whom I read long back, and I kind of tried to philosophize what he said into most of the modes of what I do in terms of writing. So there is a poet called Rilke. So, and he's a very famous poet. And there was this very young poet who went to Rilke once, and he told Rilke that I want to be a poet. What should I do? Am I ready? What do you think? All these, you know, young poet he is, and he's asking this very experienced poet about the craft of writing poetry. And Rilke replies, don't write, you're not ready yet. To which the young poet says, when do you think I'm ready? And then Rilke says, write when you think you will die without writing. And that kind of stayed with me, you know. So poetry, he said that if you think that if you don't write, you will just die, it's that day when you are ready to write poetry. And that kind of stayed with me because not that the ethos of writing. So when I kind of write, I weigh my sentences into my writing, and that is something that I keep my eye, because like Dr. Prabha said, I guide a lot of PhD students, and initially they come up with all kinds of writings, bubbling with energy, you know, when they come for their PhD. And so every time I tell them, you read each sentence, and if you think you can do away with it, just go on removing it. Keep it only when you think your write-up can't do without that sentence. Unlike our bodies, which has just one soul, I believe, in writing, each line has a soul of its own. And therefore, in the absence of that soul going missing from that sentence, probably that is not worth putting it in a paragraph. So something like that. Of course, it has to be not only logical, but also well organized. So each idea discussed in the paragraph should be well explained and thoroughly evidenced, supporting paragraph controlling idea. Now, example, I will just read out. Schools should offer courses to help students with the problems of unemployment. Such a course might begin with a discussion of where to find employment, then cover resume writing and interviewing, Algebra and history don't help students with real world needs. They are required courses that students aren't interested in. And this is frustrating for students who would rather learn about other subjects. If schools offered job skills courses, students would be well prepared for the difficult task of finding a job once they finish the school. So it is again about the idea of what is important in terms of practical needs for students in academics. So if you see the idea that goes on, the primary idea is that we need to have something for the students that can get them employed, that kind of built their employment skills, which is writing a job application letter, building up their resume, or the task of interviewing, all those things, instead of uh, too many algebra lessons and too many history lessons probably is not going to solve the purpose of making them employment ready. I'll just quickly analyze one of the, or maybe I can just do away with it and close it here because I would like to take some questions. So these are some of my thoughts on paragraph writing, about how we can be careful while writing. So when you attempt to write your paragraph next time, or maybe attempt to make somebody, because most of you are in the position of making somebody write a paragraph, uh, maybe these are some of the key points that you can take note of, keep it in mind while framing one. What it does primarily is that it kind of prepares you towards pruning your ideas in terms of how you will represent it in an academic paragraph writing. So I thank you on that, and maybe I can take up questions now if there are any.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am. Yeah, so if anybody has any question, please go ahead.
I'll pause my share. Maybe I can write down my also, yeah.
Yeah, please turn on your videos sometime so that screenshots can be taken. Even after asking, only a few people turn off.
I've also shared my email ID just in case at any point of time somebody wants to write to me. I would be happy to address their queries.
So if you have any question, you can ask. If no questions, we can end this session.
In general, also, if you want to ask me something about communication or anything, I'm absolutely open to the idea of that. Not necessarily paragraph writing, but in case you are interested to know anything about
Excuse me, ma'am.
do in class, what is it like?
Good morning, ma'am.
Yeah, good morning.
Yeah, please.
I'm Chandrasekhar.
Yeah, hello, Chandrasekhar.
Ma'am, my question is how to improve reading skills among the children of age group of 10 to 12 years. That is, they are between third class and seventh class. I tried with the syllables, but it doesn't work active well. Is there any other method? The child is not reading well, and he's reading with the spellings one by one and not able to frame a word. So in such situation, what type of strategy we can adopt to make him read well? That is
Uh,
one question.
okay. I'll come to one by one. So, okay. Whatever I speak is out of my own personal experience and totally my own understanding of, you know, the communication strategies. So, when you talk about any human being, especially in the very formative years that you're talking about, uh, 10 to, age 10 or so, I think visuals work very well. So instead of introducing uh, him or her directly to the craft of reading a book, I think you can introduce the visuals along with the verbal. So stories with subtitles would be very good idea. And these days, I think YouTube is a very good medium. Also, there are a lot of CDs and etc. materials available on Amazon. So Amazon is a very good site you can refer to, and a lot of materials you can order from there. So you can go ahead with stories of his choice. First, I think the first thing, if you have privy to, I think you can go ahead and engage him or her with a conversation and find out about interest. Like some people would be very interested in sports. Some will be interested in some kind of Jataka tales and all, and some maybe in friendship stories. So what we also can like call so stories of morality and some maybe science stories. So you have first tap about that interest probably, and based on that, go to a medium of visual verbal medium of seeing or a story. Probably once that interest is built, then shifting to only narrative would be easier. So that is, I think, in my opinion, first directly going to verbal medium may not be great idea. Introduce to the visual first, because that is what happens when we are kids. When we are growing up, we you remember when I don't know, but if you remember, maybe when we were also, my parents keep telling me stories about how I would read the entire book without knowing any word. So I would just go on turning pages. Even in India today, I read stories. So I would read pages after pages, because my parents used to read a magazine called Dharmyug and India Today at that point of time. I would turn pages and go on narrating my own story. So story is not there written; it's here. So you have to develop that probably first. So that is my response to your first question. Yes, you can now shoot your second question, and I think whatever I know, I'll try to answer with.
Yes,
Uh,
thank you. The
yeah.
second one is nowadays the students are more addicted or adapted to the technology, and that's why they are not putting pen on paper, pen or pencil. They like to write or type. They like to type much instead of writing on paper. So because of this, I think that the writing skills or writing habits are they are declining day by day, and as well as reading habits also. As you said, visuals, they like to watch, they like to enjoy that, they enjoy that YouTube's all these videos. After that, if we ask them to speak or put on paper, they're not ready to do. And even technology based writing like blogging or and creating separate web, they are able to do it, or at least they can make a folder of every day whatever they learn. They can type in word document, or they can keep at least they are that is not also happening with the young children and even graduate children also. They are not interested to put pen on paper. That's why that has a lot of impact on at the end of examinations. The time is not sufficient for them, and they are unable to put their ideas properly. They are much habituated to the multiple choice questions, online examination, multiple choices. So that job is done, which is more convenient. They are not writing at all. So how to bring to the back situation? That has become a challenging one for me.
What is challenge for you remains challenge for all is the kind of confession first I would like to make, Professor Chandrasekhar. So I think I'll tell you what I do, and probably if that can help you, maybe you can also go ahead. So we do have a little bit of internal marks in our hand.
Yes.
So 10 marks I make sure I give on the basis of the notes that they have done.
Okay.
So the entire practice of that is done to kind of lessen, if not kind of completely eradicate, their practice of using the lingo that is today. You know, them is DEM. I don't know where they get this spelling.
That is
So
means
nice two. Two is always two. So when they write this numerical two, then I tell them, okay, I understand this two you have written. It's very good. But how do I know if it's TOO or TWO? You leave it to me for interpretation, right? So I sometimes also make fun of them that what do you think? खुद मैंने लिख दिया, आप खुद समझ लीजिए. So I mean, which means that I have written, you understand yourself. So you know, those are some of the things that I do. Like I make sure I assign some marks, like 10 marks or so, to their notebook. And I make sure that I do, though I don't give them 10 marks, I keep saying them that I have 10 marks on the basis of your notebook. So that is what something that I do. And then in the pressure, they go on making notes. Also, for every class, I run a WhatsApp group. So it's there, giving them their way. And I make sure they don't write any WhatsApp message, which is just like that, you know, like FYI. I say, no, I don't want FYI. I don't want FNA. You don't write to me all those things. You write properly for your action, for your information. Whatever you have to write, write. Put a comma. Don't write a WhatsApp message like you're writing to. It's a formal WhatsApp group. It's an informal way of communicating formal things. So make everything very formal. So when they write sentences, they write, do we have a class tomorrow? Question mark. If they don't write like that, I don't respond. I said, I'm not responding to wrong grammar. I'm after all, I say that I am like, totally, I'm not, you may be grammarly challenged, I am not. So if you respond to me in a good vocabulary, in a good sentence, if your syntax and structure is fine, I'm responding, otherwise I'm not responding. Though it becomes a very difficult scene now with online thing, because online is like huge. We teach very huge classes in the first year, more than 200 students in one go. So it's very difficult to keep track because you know how online is. But when things were offline, I think things were comparatively easier. Now it's of course challenging for all of us. Online has its own method of working, and probably we are not attuned to so much of it right now. Maybe in due course of time, if this becomes the pedagogy, I think we will find ways as teachers, as academicians, as people who are in charge of this responsibility. We have held the charge of taking our future generations ahead. So I think we will find a way out for that. But right now, I think online is something that all of us are struggling with. And we are kind of constantly juggling to find a way in which we can benefit all of them in a very, what you can say, very justified way. Because I think when you are in a class, you see a student, you see his or her body language, you see the response, you can make them stand, you can, there are various ways in which we are conditioned to tap the student's interest in the class. But in online method, it's so bland. We are not used to it. So therefore, we are still negotiating the space of online.
Stuck అయిపోయింది.
అది కట్ చేయడానికి దీంతో రావట్లేదు, ఏది కట్ అవ్వట్లేదు.
Sir, is it stuck to everybody?
Sure. Yeah. Suddenly what happened, I don't know.
Yeah, she might have lost the connection, internet connection.
Might be, sir, might be.
Yes, yes. So let's wait for a while. She might be trying to join again. Yes.
Can you hear me? I think just all of a sudden it just went off.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think I have answered whatever little I know of President Shekhar as much as I can. But yes, at any point of time you feel like discussing it a little more, I am absolutely open to the idea.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. You answered for my another question also. That is how to reduce this SMS language and this online language mincemeating this language also. That also
Exactly.
you answered. You answered very well. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Those 60 minutes that we go in the class, I think if we make sure that even though those 60 minutes of conditioning, structured conditioning we can provide in terms of polishing their language, I think some work will be done.
Yes, yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much.
Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning, ma'am. Oh, sorry. Yes, sir. You go ahead, please.
Okay, so ma'am, thank you so much for nice session, especially for me that I am in initial phase of writing my research paper. So I have two basic questions. So what should be the optimum length of a paragraph? And second, I am always struggling while I'm changing my paragraph. So I am unable to correlate this from one paragraph to another paragraph. Can you please give some light on this second topic?
Yeah. So first of all, about ideal paragraph, sometimes paragraphs can range up to 500 words. Totally depends on the kind of research paper. I'm particularly talking about in terms of research paper.
Yes.
So in humanities, say for example, a paragraph can run very long. It can run up to 500 because in humanities, mostly it's the explication of ideas that gets kind of coalesced, okay? But in terms of engineering and social sciences, the paragraphs are not very long. They are somewhere between the range of 250, 300, maximum 350, something like that, when we talk about the length of paragraph. Now, let me come to the second point of what you're saying in terms of making transition. Now, if somebody, anybody, you, me, even after so much of writing, even now I face a lot of trouble while penning my research paper. So generally, the kind of methods that I employ is what I will tell you. So even before I go on to write a complete research paper, a skeleton is made much beforehand. So based on whatever I have read, so I will tell you what I do when I write a research paper. So say, for example, I am supposed to write on the negative effects of COVID-19. Suppose that is my research paper. That is what my research paper is going to be. So I go to possibly every medium. I search Google Books. I go to Trailer Francis Online. I go to Sage. I go to Springer, Elsevier, everywhere, and look for articles and books that talk about negative effects of COVID-19. And I make sure in writing, I kind of put down. So even before I have started to write, I have these at least 30 to 35 references from various sources that are going to talk about COVID-19 transition. Now, the second point that I do is I download all these materials or I get hold of all these materials. Now, when I get hold of all these materials, I start reading them. Now, this is the longest procedure, okay? And it takes about 1 month, 1.5 months minimum to kind of go through the entire material that I have downloaded. And while I am reading the entire, article, I make a few points here and there for each article. And based on this, I kind of classify into the way my article will shape up. So now I get into the third phase of writing, wherein I make small points of how I'll go to talk about negative effects. So if I kind of broadly classify, I'll talk about economic classification, I'll talk about psychological classification, I'll talk about the physical manifestation or clinical manifestations it had, and then kind of club my articles based on this. Okay. And then based on this, I further classify in emotional what, and then build my paragraphs. So and probably that is one mistake that I think you might be doing, for which you are facing difficulty, that you want to begin writing immediately. Immediately you can't. Writing is an exercise that happens much later. A lot of reading, a lot of thinking, a lot of speaking has already gone into. Like when you are writing, say for example, any topic you choose, you speak a lot on your own on that. I think that is also a very good exercise of coming out of that sphere wherein you have the tendency to make mistakes in terms of your transition. So you see how you imagine an audience in front of you and you speak about that topic. Automatically, you will find that there is a kind of a coherence, because getting coherence in speaking is very easy. If you have read, you'll get it. You need not, you don't need things very systematically written to speak coherently. So let coherence come into your speaking first, and then it can further seep into your writing. So I think I think lack of preparation might be one of the reasons. So you prepare very well much before you have attempted to write, and read a lot, and then go on to make that transition. So I think once you have classified your articles into different kind of points that you will make, I think your transition will be smoother.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Welcome. And in case at any point of time you feel that I can be of help, I am ready to do that.
Yes, sure, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Madam, in this pandemic, madam, good morning. Myself,
Yes.
Shashi Kumar.
Good morning, ma'am. Oh.
Yeah.
All right, sir, you take the turn.
Oh,
Oh,
thanks.
I have Dr. Nidhi as well. I think she was speaking earlier. I think maybe I can take Dr. Nidhi first. Dr. Nidhi,
Yes,
please go ahead.
Thank you, ma'am. No problem. Good morning. Although it is all very well, but I sort of have a personal problem while it comes to writing. One, that I often repeat the same thought in different words. And while I'm revising it, I do sort of edit it, but then this happens very often with me. I'm repeating the same thought, but in different words, and which is not good. You should not repeat. Secondly, sometimes I have, especially when it comes to research writing, I have thoughts which are connected, and I don't know. I know ideally we should write in short sentences, but I don't know how to break the sentences. I sort of try to do that, but sometimes just for the heck of it, I abruptly break them and make them two shorter sentences instead of one long sentence. So if you can just guide into me how sort of I overcome that.
So I'll come to your first part of query, which is like all of us have. So it's not your personal problem. It's the problem that we face very, very frequently. In the absence of somebody editing your document, that is quite a possibility. So one of the things that I did earlier when I used to write was that whenever I completed an article, I just left it for 10 days, good 10 days, or at least a week. I would not touch it. Because what happens in the process of writing, we get so engrossed, because it's like 2-3 months of writing, 2-3 months consecutively. You are thinking about the same thing. You are writing the same thing. You're reading the same thing. because article writing is very, very difficult. I mean, no qualms about that. So when we take up this writing, we get so engrossed in the process that we fail to see our own mistakes. And that is why the best way possibly that I do, I mean, I keep it away for some time, like 1 week or 10 days minimum. And then I go back to the writing all over again. In between, I'm just reading, nothing else. I'm just reading on that topic. And then I go back to that article again and kind of start proofreading it small portions. Like I print 1 page and then proofread that and then go to another page. It's not like printing 18 pages together and doing it. It's just 1 page a day. I take my own sweet time to finish my research paper. I take a lot of time. In fact, 1 article at least takes about 3 to 6 months of writing in terms of how it goes. Like, it's an entire exercise that happens. It's not that I pull up something, I decide something to write today, and then in 10 days time it's written. It's never happened. And if it has happened, it has never got published. I'll tell you my initial experiences, when I was very, very young and I was writing. So I would always think, article likliya, okay, 1 month I would finish. But then those articles never got published. They were always rejected. And then in the process, I learned that it is not going to happen unless I invest a lot of time and a lot of reading into these writings. And there is when I started decoding the methods of how to publish or how to write a research paper in the first place. And then these are some of the things that you have to invest a lot of time. You have to bring your article to a kind of a logical end when you are, or opening for that matter, when you are writing that. So first is, of course, you leave it for some day and then go back to it. That might solve or reduce let me use a safe word, reduce your problem of getting on it. The second thing is about the language, which of course is about breaking. So I think you can get hold of a good friend of yours who can edit a document for you and see from somebody else's perspective your article. It's very important to have some people in your life who you can trust with also your document. Like I would any day send my document to Dr. Dwivedi, and Dr. Dwivedi can send his document any point of time to me. So and we can edit each other's document and see the kind of lekine that is there in our writing. So in the same way, you should probably build that kind of confidence in some friend of yours who might as well be a colleague of yours, who you can completely trust in terms of sharing your document, and let him or her help you in seeing those small problems related to editing in the beginning. And a few times when this process happens, you will automatically start seeing your own flaws. But it's a collective process. If you want an easy process, it's a collective process. Else you learn it on your own way, it's a long process. Of course, you can as well do it yourself, reading and editing and everything else. But that's a longer process. It will take longer time because whatever you are doing best, you need somebody else's eye to see the kind of lekine that you want to see in your article. You want to see improvement. So your own eyes will never reach out to the kind of improvement areas that you can highlight. So you need somebody else. So like when I write, I give it to my students sometimes. Absolutely okay. You proofread. And then they read and then they come with all the mistakes that I have done. And then they show me, ma'am, you have done this wrong here. Maybe this idea you can put in here. Absolutely okay. In the interest of your writing, do anything. So something like that.
Right. That pretty well gives me an idea how to, sort of, maybe we are biased also, and our eyes, as you said, would not see the mistakes. So yes. Thank you. Thank you so much.
It's like your own child. It's your brainchild.
Exactly, I would say that. That is why we become biased to it. Even when somebody is editing, it's like they're cutting a piece of our heart.
Yeah. So even if somebody is doing that, don't feel bad about it. You think that you have sent your kid to school and the teacher is punishing only for the betterment of the kid. So something like that.
Yeah, right. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Tripathi. It's been a great session. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nidhi. Yeah, so I had somebody else, Professor Shashi or somebody.
Yes, ma'am. Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning, sir.
Ma'am, actually, my concern is, ma'am, throughout the country, every now and then we are listening about declining interest of students in engineering education. And like you are also serving in engineering institution, how do you collaborate with the engineering academics to ensure, yeah, they go well along with the budding technocrats of our country? This is a very critical issue which we are facing nowadays, ma'am.
See, I think sometimes what happens is that if there is too much of food on your platter, it kind of takes away the interest. Probably that is what is happening. Also, it's a transition. It's a phase of transition.
Yeah.
And like few years back, if you talk about, say, 10 years back, entrepreneurship was not a concept in our mind. But in 10 years, we have seen so many entrepreneurs. So much so that many of the institutions have entrepreneurship courses where these new venture people also come and lecture. These students know how to take bank loans, how to sell their products, how to sell their idea, all those things. So why I'm talking about is about this transition phase is that from a very strict core of academics, wherein this was an entire platform to build engineers in due course of time who will be part of some MNC or some company or PSU, whatever. We are going into a phase where this engineering degree can lead to multiple things.
Yes.
And that is why probably not just students, also we are in a state of what we can say, unclear state, a state of chaos where nothing is very clear to us. What will they do? So while some student who says, no, after this, I will work for Google is fine for us. There is another student who says, no, I might go for a kind of an entrepreneurship where I'll sell these ideas, where I'll take up, some kind of internet stuff, internet security, cyber security measures. And there is some idea about, building some kind of things that help the railways or the medical, or for that matter, some kind of data analysis in terms of how language will be, emotional analysis, Facebook. So these are all new areas which students are exploring these days. So probably it's two-way thing, Professor Shashi. I think while our students are exploring our new set of avenues, I think for us also it's time for adjustment to these new set of avenues, because we are not conditioned. So probably it's kind of a double-edged thing. I think it will take also for us as academicians to understand the kind of exploring that these students are doing. Probably we also have some kind of block in our minds. So that is why it is difficult for us to accept one day when in a third year, very bright student of ours comes and says, I don't want to work in Google and I want to do. It's like, when rank one says, I don't want to go to IITs and I want to study physics in IISc Bangalore.
Yeah.
So the parents get like, oh my God, what is this kid want to do? He's getting IIT Bombay and he's getting IIT Delhi, and still he wants to study physics in IISc. But the son is clear, the daughter is clear. With this rank one, I want to study physics, because I have interest in physics. So, these days, so much of it is pinned around interest, passion, what I want to do, which was not the case in our times. Like
Yes.
our parents decided, this is what you will do, and then done.
Yeah.
Something like that. I think it's an adjustment from both sides.
But madam, one more issue which we are facing, like students opt for engineering curriculum, but later upon during completing their degree course, they realize that like they are not fit for that.
They are still in our phase. Their parents have told them, engineer bano.
They
want to become musicians. You don't know that.
मैडम
Maybe
एक
they
इशू और इसमें
musicians.
देखा मैडम ये था कि लाइक उनको फिर बोलते हैं कि लाइक अच्छे से बुक्स पढ़ो, कम्युनिकेशन इतनी अच्छी नहीं है, इसलिए आपका क्योंकि जो सब्जेक्ट है मैडम इसको मैं एम्फसाइज कर रहा हूँ,
हाँ.
उनको पढ़ने में परेशानी है, कोडिंग की बात करते हैं, कोडिंग में परेशानी है, लिखने में परेशानी है, तो मतलब एक मैस हो जाता है जब वो 4 साल खत्म करते हैं, उनको समझ में नहीं आता कि अब करे तो क्या करें।
और सर उसमें भी बड़ी बात है जब वो चाहते हैं कि उसका कोई रेडीमेड सोल्यूशन हम दे दें।
यस
हमारे
बिल्कुल
पास आते हैं स्टूडेंट्स कम्युनिकेशन की प्रॉब्लम लेकर, और मैं उन्हें बार बार बताती हूँ कि देखो मेरे पास कोई दवाई नहीं है
यस
कि मैं तुम्हें खिला दूंगी पकड़ के और तुम्हारा हो गया काम। ये एक प्रोसेस है जिसमें तुम्हें जाना ही होगा।
एग्जैक्टली या
तो
इट इज अ प्रोसेस इटसेल्फ।
यस एंड यू हैव टू गिव एग्जांपल्स। तो हमारे यहाँ कुछ हम लोग एग्जांपल्स हर साल ही क्रिएट करते हैं, हम उन पे बड़ी मेहनत करते हैं। जैसे कि एक्स्ट्रा टाइम पे हम उन्हें बुलाते हैं, उनसे एक फीडबैक लेते हैं। जैसे कुछ किसी को स्पोर्ट्स में इंटरेस्ट है तो हम स्पोर्ट्स का एक सेशन देखकर आकर उनको उसको समझाने के लिए खुद कहते हैं। तो हमारे यहाँ जो एक चीज हम लोग करते हैं कि एक हमारे क्लास आवर्स के बियॉन्ड एक ऑफिस आवर्स होता है, उसमें कोई भी स्टूडेंट हमें लिख कर आकर मीटिंग कर सकता है हमारे साथ। तो उस टाइम को भी हम यूटिलाइज करते हैं स्टूडेंट से इंटरैक्ट करने में। और कुछ एक स्टूडेंट्स हम हमेशा हर साल चुनते हैं जिसके लैंग्वेज पे हम वर्क करेंगे, और फिर उन्हीं को हम आइडियल बना के बाकी स्टूडेंट्स को बताते हैं,
ब्रांड एम्बेसडर बना देते हैं बेसिकली उनका।
हाँ, ऐसा करते हैं हम लोग हर बार।
जी जी जी, थैंक यू।
एक मॉडल तैयार हो जाता है।
राइट मैम, बिल्कुल सही। राइट, थैंक्स मैम।
Okay,
Thank you,
so now due to the paucity of time, we won't be able to take up any other question. Thank you very much, ma'am. Thank you for this insightful and very engaging talk. I'm sure
Thank you so
everyone
much,
enjoyed
everybody.
it, looking at the involvement with your lecture. So thank you very much for this
Thank you so
session.
much, everybody. It was very nice meeting you. And Dr. Dwivedi, thank you so much again for inviting me.
Thank you.
At any point of time, anybody feels like writing to me, I'm absolutely okay with the idea of interacting. Thank you so much. Have a very great day further. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. So we'll meet at 11:15 for the next session.
Hello.
Thank you. Pankaj, just end the session and immediately start it again.
Hello.
Okay, sir. Yeah, please tell me.
Hello, Prabha sir, do we get the recordings of these sessions, sir?
Yeah, it needs to be uploaded after the workshop is over. So it will be uploaded on the YouTube.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And link will be shared with the funding agency, AICTE.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay, sir. I'm ending the session.